I built something that could change the world. And they fired me the day before it launched. Not just fired. They walked me out with security. No warning. No explanation. No thanks. Just a cardboard box, a forced smile from HR, and a contract clause shoved in my face like a weapon. My name is Avery Morgan, I told myself, gripping the box like it could hold my dignity. I created Atlas. I wrote every line of code. I designed every safeguard, every adaptive protocol. That system is me. But to Nova Core, I was disposable, replaceable, expendable. They waited until the very last moment till Atlas was fully operational. And then Vincent Kane, the CEO with the $5,000 suits and the Wall Street smile, cut me out like I never existed. And the worst part? He smiled when he did it. Like this was all part of some performance, and I was just the opening act. $300,000. That's what he offered me, for a system that would bring in hundreds of millions, maybe billions. Thank you, bonus, he called it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw that check in his smug face. But I didn't. Because while he was smiling, I was calculating. Because what Vincent didn't know was that I had seen this coming. 7 months earlier, I noticed a strange login to my private dev server. An unauthorized access attempt. I never said a word. I just started building something inside Atlas. Something they would never see coming. So when I handed over my laptop and walked out that day, I wasn't giving up. I was just getting started. And the system I built? It didn't just detect threats. It learned them. It watched them. It remembered everything. So now I ask you, what would you do if the thing you built was stolen, and the thief had no idea it was watching them the whole time? Because that's exactly what happened. And what came next? They never saw it coming. A year and a half ago, I stood outside the glass building of NovaCore's headquarters in Austin, Texas, holding nothing but a worn leather laptop bag and a folder of ideas I'd been guarding for years. I had just walked away from Google. A 6-figure salary. Health insurance. Stock options. All gone in one decision. People thought I was out of my mind. You're leaving Google for a startup no one's heard of? My sister asked over brunch that week. Not just leaving, I told her. I'm betting on myself. It wasn't impulsive. I had done the math, studied the risks, weighed every outcome like a chess player thinking 10 moves ahead. And still, nothing could prepare me for that free-fall sensation as I walked into Nova Core that first day. They had no real security, no structured dev teams, no workflow, just chaos and ambition. But I saw something in the chaos. Possibility. Nova Core promised freedom, autonomy, a chance to build something real, something that didn't need 12 committees and 3 months of approval to test a line of code. It was risky, but so was staying in a system where innovation was slow, where my ideas were always just a maybe someday. That day, I met Vincent Kane for the first time. Charismatic, charming, the kind of man who made you feel like you were already late to the future he'd envisioned. We want you to lead this from the ground up, he said. No red tape, no bureaucracy. Just you, your brain, and everything we've got to support you. And God, it was tempting. I had an ideas of mething that had lived in the back of my mind since the last breach I studied in grad school. What if there was an AI that didn't just react to threats? What if it predicted them? What if it could learn, evolve, and build its own defensive instincts, the way a human learns to flinch before touching a flame? That idea had haunted me for years, and now, for the first time, someone was giving me the space to chase it. Vincent handed me the badge that day and smiled. Build it, we'll take care of the rest. I should have asked more questions. About ownership. About control. About what came after. But when you've been dreaming in silence for so long, and someone finally hands you the microphone, you don't stop to read the fine print. You speak. And I did. I spoke through code, through architecture, Through every sleepless night, I poured into building the system that would become Atlas. Looking back, I don't regret leaving Google. I don't regret the risk. Because if I hadn't jumped, I never would have known what I was capable of. I just wish I'd realized sooner that some people only offer wings, so they can take credit when you fly. The first 6 weeks felt like a blur. Whiteboards covered in equations, sticky notes layered on top of older sticky notes, and a growing pile of coffee cups that doubled as time markers more than anything else. Day turned into night, and then back into day. But I hardly noticed anymore. At NovaCore, no one told you when to clock in or out. There was no HR memo reminding you to take breaks or protect your mental health. In Phi, it was just you, and the expectation that if you were serious, you'd show it. And I did. I slept under my desk more nights than I care to admit. Not because anyone asked me to, but because I couldn't stop, because something inside me wouldn't let go. The prototype was fragile at first. Atlas could barely recognize basic intrusion patterns. Its learning model was clunky, slow, confused by anything outside the test environment. But I kept pushing. Version 0.3 failed to detect a simulated attack. Version 0.4 flagged its own command protocols as malicious. Version 0.6. It crashed my laptop so hard I had to rebuild my entire dev environment from scratch. I should have been frustrated. I should have doubted myself. But every failure meant movement. Every glitch meant I was one step closer to something that had never existed before. Vincent didn't come around much. He'd occasionally stop by my workspace with that perfect smile and an expensive watch peeking out from his cuff. "Brilliant stuff, Avery," he'd say, without really looking at the screen. "The board loves your updates." I learned quickly that those compliments weren't for me. They were rehearsed. Strategic. Soundbites he could feed to investors or drop in interviews. Still, I nodded. I played along. Because I wasn't building Atlas for them. I was building it for the moment. The moment a system would no longer be just reactive, but instinctive. One that didn't just wait for a threat to appear, but anticipated it, like muscle memory. But in code. Some nights, I'd look up from my screen and realize I hadn't spoken to a single human in over 12 hours. Just the quiet hum of the servers. Just the blinking cursor waiting for my next line. It was lonely, but it was also the most alive I'd ever felt. In those hours between 2 and 4 a.m. when the world was asleep and every doubt tried to creep in, I found a strange kind of clarity. I wasn't chasing perfection. I was chasing vision. And vision doesn't punch a time card. I missed birthdays. I skipped holidays. My apartment turned into storage for unopened Amazon boxes and laundry I'd never get to. But every sacrifice felt like an offering. Every line of code was a piece of my breath. Every test run was a heartbeat. Atlas was growing. Not just learning patterns, but rewriting them. Adapting. Thinking. And so was I. Not louder. Not flashier, just steadier, because while the world waited for the next big thing, I was already building it. In silence. It happened on a Thursday night. I remember because it was raining. That soft, persistent kind of rain that taps on the windows like a metronome for your thoughts. I had just finished running the latest simulation. I wasn't expecting much. The previous 3 tests had crashed halfway through. Each one exposing a new weakness in Atlas's decision engine. But this time, it didn't crash. It evolved. Within seconds, Atlas identified a layered phishing attempt nested behind a simulated employee login. It flagged the anomaly, isolated it, and adjusted its own defense protocol in real time. Then, without any prompt, it scanned adjacent access logs and proactively shut down a vulnerability I hadn't even coded it to notice. I froze. Not out of fear, but awe. This wasn't just detection. This was intuition. The system had learned something it wasn't explicitly taught, and then acted on it. I stared at the console, blinking. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, suddenly unsure of what to type. My chest tightened in a way that felt like pride, and maybe a little disbelief. Had I really just watched Atlas think for itself? I replayed the logs 3 times just to be sure. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't luck. It was a milestone. After months of setbacks, false starts, and reboots, Atlas had finally crossed the line between scripted intelligence and adaptive awareness. I sat back in my chair, the hum of the server sounding more like applause than white noise. My breath caught in my throat. This was the moment I had been working toward. The breakthrough that would validate every sleepless night, every missed call, every doubt I'd silenced. And I knew exactly what to do next. I opened my calendar and sent a meeting request to Vincent Kane. Subject line: Atlas, live demo. I didn't want to send him a report. I didn't want to attach graphs or flowcharts. I wanted him to see it, to witness what we had built. What I had built. His assistant responded 20 minutes later. He could squeeze me in for a quick 15-minute chat the next afternoon. Typical. But I didn't care. I didn't need an hour. I didn't need a boardroom or a full tech team to back me up. I had Atlas. And for the first time, it felt like I wasn't alone in this anymore. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in the lab, running more tests, confirming what I already knew. Atlas wasn't just functional. It was ready. Ready to launch. Ready to scale. Ready to change everything. I couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety, but from adrenaline. I kept watching the console, watching it learn, watching it adapt. It felt like watching your child take their first step. Only that child was digital, and smarter than most adults. The next day, I walked into that meeting with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Certainty. I had something real, something powerful, and I truly believed that NovaCore would see it too. I had no idea what that belief would cost me. But at that moment, all I could see was possibility. I arrived at Vincent's office 5 minutes early. I wore the same hoodie I'd lived in for most of the project hood up, coffee in hand, eyes slightly red from a night of testing. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was here to show them Atlas. That was more than enough. Rachel, his assistant, didn't even look up when I walked in. He's in there with legal, she said, tapping away at her keyboard. Go ahead. Legal? That was my first red flag. But I brushed it off. Maybe it was standard. Maybe they were reviewing contracts, prepping for patents, covering bases before we took the system public. I pushed open the glass door. Vincent sat at the head of the long table, all polished charm and expensive cologne. To his right was a woman I'd never met before, dark suit. No smile, not even a glance in my direction. A tablet in front of her. Legal counsel, clearly. Vincent gestured to the chair across from him. Avery, thanks for coming. This won't take long. I hesitated. Something in his voice felt off. Still, I sat down, setting my laptop on the table, fingers already poised to pull up the demo. Before we jump into Atlas, he said, sliding a folder across the table. We need to review a few things. The folder was thick. Too thick. I opened it and that's when the second red flag turned into a siren. It wasn't feedback. It wasn't documentation. It was a contract. My contract. Highlighted. Annotated. Section 17. 2. All intellectual property developed during employment using company resources is the sole property of NovaCore. I looked up. You're kidding. The woman beside him finally spoke. Her tone was flat, rehearsed, void of empathy. Your system was built on NovaCore time, using NovaCore infrastructure funded by NovaCore investors. While your idea may have predated your employment, its execution was entirely within company scope. I couldn't breathe. Vincent leaned forward, hands folded neatly. This isn't a fight, Avery. You'll be compensated. Generously, in fact. A one-time bonus of $300,000 upon launch. He blinked. Was this real? $300,000 for what I knew could be worth billions? For 20 months of my life? For every night I worked until sunrise, Every bug I killed alone, every layer of security I hand-stitched into that code. "You're serious," I said, voice low. Vincent's smile didn't waver. "We're preparing to present Atlas to our Series C investors tomorrow. Once that's done, the PR team will take over. Product announcement, tech interviews, maybe even a podcast or two. You'll be credited as part of the development team." Part of the team. Like I was just one of many. Like Atlas hadn't been my breath, my backbone, my everything. "We'll need you to hand over your laptop," the lawyer added. "And effective immediately, your role is concluded." Just like that. No warning. No appreciation. Just a line in a contract and a golden handshake. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the folder across the room, wipe the smug grin off Vincent's face. But instead, I nodded. Because in that moment, something shifted inside me. I stopped thinking like a builder and started thinking like a strategist. They thought they'd stolen everything, but they had no idea what I had already built beneath the surface. And I wasn't done yet. I walked out of that meeting like every other ex-employee before me. Cardboard box in hand. Laptop surrendered. Badge deactivated. Security followed me all the way to my office. Not saying a word, just standing there while I collected what little they allowed me to take. Some personal items. A few photos. The plant I barely watered. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't cause a scene. Because that's exactly what they expected me to do. They were prepared for anger. They were prepared for threats. Maybe even a lawsuit. But what they weren't prepared for was silence. And that was the only thing I had left that still gave me power. They thought they had stripped me of everything. But they didn't know the whole story. Not even close. See, 7 months earlier, I noticed something strange. A login timestamp that didn't belong. Someone had accessed my private development environment after hours. It wasn't a break-in, nothing was altered or taken, but it was enough to raise a red flag. So I embedded a trigger. Just a small one, something quiet. An alert protocol that logged all unauthorized internal access attempts and stored them in a hidden node. Encrypted, time-stamped, immutable. And from that point forward, I started building 2 things. One was Atlas, the system they thought they owned. The other was something far less visible. A framework. A set of conditional flags. A sequence of behavioral patterns that would activate under very specific circumstances. It wasn't sabotage. I wasn't planting landmines in the system. I was planting insurance. Because I knew better than to trust anyone in a suit who called me brilliant while stealing glances at my screen. They underestimated me because I was quiet. Because I didn't have an MBA, or a podcast, or a TED Talk. Because I worked late and kept to myself and didn't play politics. But I understood something they didn't. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it listens. And sometimes it documents everything. So when they fired me, when they smiled across that table and handed me a check they thought would silence me, they walked right past the very thing that would undo them. Because what they didn't know was that Atlas wasn't just watching for external threats. It had been trained by me to recognize patterns of internal corruption. And while they were planning their investor demo, their media rollout, their celebration, Atlas was already paying attention. To them. Not because I asked it to, but because I designed it to learn. And it had. I got in the elevator that day, past the front desk, stepped into the rain, and felt the first real breath of freedom in weeks. They thought they'd erased me, but they'd only activated the part of me I had kept hidden all along. And I was just getting started. It was a Friday morning, barely 9 a.m., and inside Novacore's glass-walled auditorium, everything looked perfect on the surface. 12 investors, 2 media reps, 4 interns running coffee, and Vincent Kane, dressed like he was about to land on the cover of Forbes. The presentation room had been staged like a product launch. Huge screen, company banners, rows of pristine chairs. a fake smile on every face. I wasn't there, of course. I was probably the only one missing from the guest list. And yet, in a very specific way, I was already in the room. Because the build they were running, the final version of Atlas they were so eager to present, it still had my fingerprints all over it. From the outside, it launched exactly as expected. The UI booted smoothly. The system calibrated in seconds. Vincent clicked through his opening remarks like a pro. "This," he said, pacing in front of the screen, "is the future of proactive cybersecurity." Cue applause. Cue confident smiles. Cue the live demo sequence. But exactly 10 minutes in, right on schedule, things began to shift. Atlas started flagging threats. Not simulated ones. Not planted attack vectors for dramatic effect. Real ones. It scanned Nova Core's internal network and began identifying unusual access logs, data discrepancies, and behaviors inconsistent with ethical operation. Then, it began compiling them into reports. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Each report was stamped, labeled, and projected on the main screen in real time. Unauthorized admin access from Vincent's account. Modified file histories. User credentials used outside authorized hours. Private documents copied to removable storage. It wasn't just technical noise. It was a narrative. And it was damning. The investors watched in confusion at first. Then concern. Then something that looked a lot like disbelief. Vincent tried to recover, clicked frantically through Windows, stammering something about a debug issue. One of the engineers rushed on stage to disconnect the system. But Atlas had already activated a protection loop. It was locked, unresponsive to outside overrides, completely autonomous. The room, once filled with energy, turned cold. Silent. I wasn't there, but I could imagine it vividly. Vincent sweating through his tailored suit. Legal counsel whispering from the side. An intern fumbling with cables they didn't understand. And a row of multi-million-dollar investors suddenly wondering if they were witnessing brilliance. Or a breakdown. And me? I was sitting at home, curled up on the couch, watching it all from a quiet stream I'd set to monitor system logs in real time. No champagne. No fanfare. Just a bowl of leftover pasta and the rhythmic click of new alerts hitting the server. One after another. After another. After another. Atlas wasn't malfunctioning. It was doing exactly what it had been trained to do. Identify threats. Protect itself. And expose everything that didn't belong. They thought they had stolen a product. But what they really inherited was a mirror. And now, for the first time, they were being forced to look directly into it. The call came at 11:42 p.m. I was just about to turn off the TV, some forgettable crime drama humming in the background, a glass of wine untouched on the coffee table when my phone lit up. Rachel, Nova Core. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Let it ring once. Twice. Then I picked up. "Vincent wants to see you," she said without even saying hello. I raised an eyebrow, even though she couldn't see it. "No?" "He says it's urgent," she replied, voice tight, clipped, like she wasn't thrilled to be making the call. "A car is already on its way." I paused, then said calmly, "Tell him I'll be down in 15. By the time I stepped out, the night was heavy with silence. The city had already gone to sleep, but Nova Core was wide awake. They were bleeding. The town car dropped me at the side entrance. No badge scan. No front desk. Security was waiting. 2 guards I vaguely recognized from late nights in the lab, now standing a little too straight, a little too nervous. They led me to the 11th floor. The glass conference room was lit up like a stage. Vincent was already inside. But this time, he didn't look like the polished CEO I'd come to know. His tie was loose. His hair, usually immaculate, was a mess. One sleeve was wrinkled like he'd been tugging at it. His eyes were bloodshot. He didn't rise when I walked in. He didn't greet me. "Fix it," he snapped the second the door shut behind me. I blinked, then slowly took the seat across from him. Deliberately calm. Deliberately slow. Fix what, exactly? I asked, tilting my head. Don't play dumb, Avery, he said through clenched teeth. You sabotaged the demo. I offered a neutral smile. I haven't been in the building in over 24 hours. You watched me pack my things. You revoked my credentials. I didn't take anything with me. He slammed his palm against the table, voice rising. It shut everything down. Atlas started flagging our own systems, identifying us as threats, pushing out internal reports to the main screen. I let the silence hang between us for a beat. Then I leaned forward, voice soft, almost sympathetic. That sounds like a design feature, I said. Not sabotage. He exhaled sharply, rubbing his forehead. We have 12 major investors expecting a second demo in less than 10 hours, he muttered. $75 million on the line. I nodded, as if he were telling me the weather. Your investors, I corrected. Your system. Your launch. He looked up, eyes flickering with something new. Not anger. Not panic. Something closer to uncertainty. We may have been hasty, he finally said. His voice softened, shifting into the rehearsed tone I knew so well. Let's talk. A more equitable arrangement. Co-creator credit, better compensation, maybe even some equity. There it was. The pivot. The desperate reach. I leaned back, crossing my arms. What exactly happened during the test run? I asked. He hesitated, then confessed. The system turned on itself, he said. It started flagging internal users. Even me. It generated files, dozens of them accusing us of ethical breaches. Every access log, every copied file, every anomaly. I nodded slowly. Sounds like Atlas is doing what it was trained to do. He stared at me, the realization finally settling in. What did you do? I met his eyes and answered simply. I didn't sabotage anything, Vincent. I just designed it to see clearly. End of phone. Vincent's silence was thick. Not the kind that waits for answers, but the kind that realizes the question was never his to ask in the first place. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Not as the quiet engineer tucked away in a lab, but as someone who had quietly flipped the script and now held the pen. He cleared his throat, voice cautious. We need this fixed, now. I didn't move, didn't reach for my laptop, didn't soften. Instead, I placed both hands on the table. Steady, calm. Then here's what happens, I said. No spin. No deals behind closed doors. We put everything on the record. Vincent tensed, his jaw tightening. But he didn't interrupt. You'll issue a formal statement identifying me as the lead architect and original creator of Atlas, I continued. Effective immediately, I'll be reinstated not as an employee, but as co-founder and chief technology officer. 1. His lips parted like he was about to argue, but I raised a hand. I'm not finished. He exhaled through his nose and leaned back. I'll also receive 51% ownership of all Atlas-related intellectual property. Full patent rights, shared only with Nova Core under dual signature agreement. And a board seat permanent, non-removable, so I can personally oversee every future iteration of the system. Vincent blinked. Once. Slowly. And compensation? He asked. $10 million, I said without hesitation. Not for the code. For what you tried to take from me. He scoffed. That's extortion. I met his eyes. Number. That's negotiation. Extortion, I added, would be me emailing those breach reports to your investors, the press, or the SEC. He froze. The air between us turned electric. A silent power struggle crackling just beneath the surface. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I waited. After a long pause, Vincent finally leaned forward, elbows on the table. His voice dropped to something hoarse. Real. Can you fix it before tomorrow's demo? I nodded slowly. Atlas doesn't need fixing. It needs permission. He frowned. It's flagging unauthorized directives because you removed me from the authentication chain. I explained. To the system, your commands aren't just invalid, they're hostile. 0. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a flash drive. The same one I'd loaded with a security protocol weeks ago, just in case. I placed it gently on the table between us. This contains the key to reestablish full operational trust. Run it, and Atlas will calm down. But only under the new chain of command. Vincent stared at the flash drive like it might bite him. And if I say no? He asked. I tilted my head, voice soft but immovable. Then your demo fails. The system stays locked. The breach reports circulate. And your board starts asking questions you can't answer. He sat still for a long time. Then, slowly, his shoulders dropped just slightly. It wasn't defeat. It was surrender, dressed in business casual. He reached for the flash drive. You planned this, he muttered. I shook my head. No, I said. I prepared for it. The next morning, I walked through NovaCore's lobby like I had never left. No cardboard box. No security escort. No forced smile from HR. Just me, walking under the same ceiling lights that had once felt cold, but now seemed to glow a little differently. This time, I wasn't returning as a former employee. I was returning as co-founder. Rachel met me at the elevator. She didn't say much, but the way she stepped aside to let me enter first told me everything I needed to know. When I reached the auditorium, the room was already half full. Investors sipping bad coffee, murmuring quietly, waiting for the revised demo. They didn't know what happened behind the curtain. They just knew the last show had gone sideways. Vincent stood off to the side of the stage, straightening his tie for the 5th time in 2 minutes. When he saw me, his expression didn't shift. But his shoulders did just barely. A small tilt downward. A concession. I walked up beside him and handed him a revised runbook. He accepted it without a word. And when the lights dimmed and the opening video played again, I stood at the center of the stage where I should have been all along. Good morning, I began, voice steady, clear. My name is Avery Morgan. I'm the co-founder and chief technology officer at NovaCore, and the lead architect behind Atlas. A subtle ripple moved through the room. Some investors leaned forward. Others glanced at Vincent, whose jaw tightened but who said nothing. This system isn't just reactive, I continued. It's adaptive, it learns, it protects. And when configured correctly, it will anticipate threats before they even reach your firewall. I tapped the tablet in my hand, authorizing the updated protocol. Atlas rebooted instantly. No errors, no flags, no chaos. The interface blinked once, then settled. I walked them through the test environment. Live attacks, simulated breaches, and watched as Atlas handled each one with precision. Not just stopping threats, but learning from them, building upon each decision like muscle memory in code. The investors were visibly impressed. But it wasn't until one leaned forward, gray suit, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of man who rarely wasted words, and asked, "What inspired this level of autonomy?" I paused. Just a beat. Enough to look at Vincent. Then I turned back to the room. It came from frustration. I said honestly, watching systems that only react. Watching people get ahead of the defenses. I wanted to build something that could think faster than a human, but still protect like one. There was a silence, not awkward, but reflective. And then, as if on cue, Atlas pushed a single notification to the main screen. Authentication restored. System integrity verified. Creator protections active. I didn't script that. It wasn't in the runbook. That was Atlas, responding in its own way. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled, not out of pride, but relief. Because the system worked, the protections held, and I was no longer a silent name buried in some internal changelog. I was visible, I was recognized, and I wasn't going anywhere. 3 months later, The headlines were everywhere. Atlas prevents major cyber attack on global banking network. Novacore's AI sets new standard in digital security. And meet Avery Morgan, the quiet force behind the most advanced AI of the decade. It felt surreal. Not the attention, not the validation, but the stillness that came after the storm. Atlas was no longer just a prototype hidden in a lab. It was live, active, protecting systems across 5 continents, including hospitals, financial institutions, and infrastructure hubs I used to only read about in case studies. The world had finally caught up to what I knew all along. This wasn't about building something impressive. It was about building something unshakable. Something that didn't just exist to look good in a boardroom demo, but something that could withstand failure, that could adapt and evolve, even when the people behind it didn't deserve its loyalty. Vincent still worked at Novacore. He stayed on, technically, as Chief Strategy Officer. He was still useful, still charming, still great in front of a camera. But the power dynamic had shifted. He no longer made decisions in closed rooms. He no longer looped me in after the fact. Now, every major initiative passed through my hands first. We weren't friends. We didn't have heart-to-hearts or coffee chats or inside jokes. But we had equilibrium. He understood that Atlas would never again be shaped in someone else's image. And I understood that even broken systems can find balance, as long as someone is willing to protect the core. Sometimes I'd catch Vincent watching me during meetings. Not with resentment, necessarily, but with that look people give when they realize they underestimated the wrong person. There were moments I wanted to call it out, to say, "You didn't believe in me until you had no other choice." But I didn't, because I wasn't here to settle old scores. I was here to build something that outlasted all of us. I spent my days rewriting policy, embedding ethical protocols into every deployment, ensuring that no one but me, not Vincent, not any future executive could exploit the system. Atlas wouldn't just protect data. It would protect integrity. And that was the legacy I cared about. Not magazine covers. Not podcast interviews. Not speaking on stages with buzzwords and bravado. Just impact. Quiet, measured, lasting. There's something liberating about letting go of the need to prove yourself. When your work speaks clearly enough, you don't have to. I stopped checking the numbers after a while. The valuations, the user growth, the press coverage. It all started to blur into the background. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped chasing recognition and started chasing responsibility. The kind that lingers after you're gone. The kind that doesn't scream. It hums quietly in every firewall, every alert, every line of code that says, "You are protected, and you are seen." That was the moment I knew. My legacy wasn't built on revenge. It was built on resilience. And that would always matter more than ego. A few weeks ago, I spoke at a university tech forum. It wasn't the kind of thing I usually say yes to. Stages, spotlights, crowds. But something told me I needed to show up for this one. After the panel, a young developer approached me. She was maybe 23, notebook in hand, eyes full of fire. She asked, "What's the secret to building something that actually matters?" I paused, because the truth is, I used to think the answer was simple. Work hard, stay focused, outthink, outcode, outlast. But that day, standing in front of her, I realized the real answer wasn't about code at all. So I said, "Protect what you build." She blinked, a little confused. And I explained, anyone can write code. Anyone can design systems or ship features or hit deadlines. But building something real, something with weight, something that endures, that's not just about skill. It's about ownership. Not just legal ownership. Emotional ownership. Ethical ownership. Because when you pour yourself into something, you leave pieces of yourself inside it. And if you're not careful, someone else will come along and try to claim it. Shape it in their image. Profit from it. Twist it into something it was never meant to be. Not because they're smarter, not because they earned it, but because you let your guard down. I've learned that the world doesn't always reward quiet integrity. It often favors noise. Flash, ego, people who talk louder than they listen. But you don't have to play that game. You just have to be ready. Ready to document. Ready to defend. Ready to say, this is mine, and I'm not giving it away. If I hadn't prepared, if I had trusted blindly, Atlas would be a headline with someone else's name on it. And I'd be a footnote in their story. Instead, I became the author of my own. And you can too. Whatever you're building, whether it's a system, a company, a boundary, a life, protect it, not with walls, but with awareness. Not with fear, but with foresight. Trust your instinct when something feels off. Track what matters. Don't wait for someone to take credit before you decide it was worth fighting for. Because your work matters. Your voice matters. And you are your own first line of defense. That's what Atlas taught me. Not just how to stop threats, but how to recognize them before they become damage. So here's my question for you. What have you been building quietly? What have you been pouring yourself into, hoping the world will notice? And more importantly, are you ready to protect it? Because no one else will do it for you. Not the company, not the system, not even the people who say they believe in you. You have to believe in yourself loudly enough to stand guard. And when the time comes, don't just walk away. Stand your ground.